In this video we're going to texture our chair. We're going to be using a different technique than we did with our table when we used cut and sew. In this one we'll be using the UV editor, the UV toolkit, along with it. Before we get started, we need to add the checkerboard pattern to it. Because it's grouped and it shares the same color node, I can select any of these components, right click, and choose Material Attribute. And then if we follow the color tab out from Color, Checkerboard, and then go to Checker, it'll apply it to anything that has that color node on it. Now there's a couple of things we need to do before we proceed with this. And just to illustrate perhaps more clearly, I'm going to select my geometry in my viewport. And when I select the back of the chair, it has the exact same shape as the base, and the legs have the exact same UV map. This UV map does not reflect the shape of that geometry. So if you recall, when we did our table, we selected the components together or one by one, and we clicked on Delete by Type History, and we went to Modify, and we chose Freeze Transform. Now if we were to apply cut and sew, or in this instance we'll be using the UV toolkit, it will make our UV maps fit the contour and shape of our geometry. I'm going to start with the leg of the chair in the back, and I'm going to go to the UV toolkit, and I'm going to open up the tab name Unfold, and I'll click on Unfold. And you can see that it cuts the shape we want and makes the UV map reflect the geometry itself. Now this is a little bit more organic, so as you get closer you'll see it's not exactly perfect, but it'll do pretty well for this context. Just to kind of compare the two, sometimes the cut and sew is a much cleaner way to do things. It really depends on the model you're working with, and you'll have to kind of decide which one works best for you as you proceed. I've got one leg done, so I'm going to right click and choose UV shell. I'll select the whole shell, and I'll just move it out from the corner where that checkerboard appears. Now I'll select the back leg, and I'll go to the object mode, and with it selected I'll go to the UV toolkit again and click on Unfold, and there's the other leg. I'm going to right click on it, choose UV and shell, select it, and I'll put it over here. Now we're putting these outside the checkerboard once it generates for us, because it would just keep generating each one right on top of each other. It would make it difficult to edit or move and sew, etc. I'll go to my object mode, and if I select and shift select those two elements we just edited, you can see where they are. When you select them in the object mode, you have the option to move these around, overlap them, which we'll be doing, and then collectively scale them all and put them back in that checkerboard square. I've got the legs done, and I don't need these other two, because once I texture them over here, I can delete these and just replicate those. So I'll go to my object mode, select the other legs, and I'll delete those. So if I select, there are my two legs. Alright, now we're going to do the base and the backrest. I'll start with the base, I'll go to the UV Edit toolkit, and I'll click Unfold. And if we kind of zoom in on this, you can see that it's kind of more organic in the way it's put it together. It's not so perfect as our Move and Sew tool, but this will be adequate for what our needs are. So I'm going to move that over to this side, and I can see I probably want to rotate that just a little bit. Now I'll go and I'll do the backrest. Right click, Object Mode, select the object, going to the UV toolkit, I'll click on Optimized, and now I have that one. I'm going to right click, choose UV shell, select that shell, and I'll put that one over here. Now I've got everything mapped out with the UVs I want. I'll return to my object mode, and I'll marquee select them all. Now I can start to combine these similar elements, and then we'll scale them and put them in the center. I'm going to put a wood grain on the legs, and then I've got a texture material pattern to put on the cushions. I'll right click, and I'll choose UV shell. I'll select this one and put it over there like so. And all I'm doing is I'm optimizing with model pieces that have similar textures, and by overlapping them, I can utilize the area of my UV map in Photoshop and make it as large as possible so the texture maintains some sort of quality. Now I'll get the legs and I'll start to scale those down, and I'll put those into position. Hitting F on the keyboard, same functions we use for our viewports affect the UV editor. And now I'm going to go back to my object mode, select everything. Be sure to select all your components in the object mode, otherwise you won't be able to go to image inside the editor and generate a UV snapshot. Now once I've got my attribute option window up, I can now save it as a PNG, and I've made it 1024 by 1024. Again, this is a number is very subjective. It's the aspect ratio. If something were needed to be detailed in the model, whether a game or animation, you need to do a close-up, that number would be higher. I'll go ahead and put it in my project folder, and I'll name it Chair Skin, and I'll hit save and apply and close. Now, very often I might have had a table and the poster, everything on this one UV map, and these little wings down here might be taking up too much space. This is an alternative. If I were to select this and just take this out, we can now incorporate the move and sew to this to economize the space that's being taken by these little wing shapes. I'm zooming in and I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose edge. I'll double click on the edge where I would like to cut this. So I'm going to double click right here, and it turns brown, telling me that it selected the whole edge. Now I can go to cut and sew and choose cut. And what that means is now I have separated that out as a separate shell. I can now right click, choose edge, and select the edge I'd like to fold this up to, and now I could click on move and sew. These are just alternate ways to do this, which you're not required to do for this. I just wanted to point out this is an option. Go to edge, select that edge, click on move and sew, and I could take a moment to go in and clean these up using the move and sew as well. Now I'll do the other one. I'll leave it right there since it's clear. Going to edge, I'll double click on this edge and double click on that one, and I'm going to go to cut, right click, edge, and now I'll select this edge, and I'll choose move and sew. I'm going to come up here now and I'll put those together so I can go in and basically economize the space in my UV map. And I'll right click, go to UV shell, and I'll select this and pull this in. Now I can select both of them and I can scale them up. Now I have the option to go in and utilize my UV map a little bit more precisely. In my model, I'll go to my object mode for my geometry, making sure I select everything, and then I'll go to image, UV snapshot, and I'll save it, apply and close. So these are two workflows for texturing the chair. The first one is perfectly adequate for our assignment. Now we'll need to go into Photoshop and put our textures in place. Now, one thing to note before I go into Photoshop is to make sure that I have put my textures over that quadrant where the checkerboard appears.